Good day, everyone, and welcome to Jack 15 Purposive Communication. For this week's lesson, we're going to discuss about communication processes, principles, models, and ethics. But before we proceed, I have a profound question, and that is, how should we communicate to people across cultures? We'll find the answers as we go along. So come and let's learn. These are the objectives of our lesson. 1. Discuss the definition, principles, process, and importance of communication. 2. Differentiate the diverse models of communication. 3. Examine the functions and types of nonverbal communication. 4. Determine the different barriers of effective communication. And number 5, enumerate the ethics of written and verbal communication in various cultural and multicultural contexts. Let's begin with the definition of communication. And the question is, what is your own definition of communication? Let's take a look at the videos.
In my opinion, communication is like a beacon of connectivity towards others.
Of interacting and transmitting information and ideas to one person to another.
It is a way to express someone's ideas and emotion through verbal signs and symbols.
Language of humanity, because communication is needed everywhere.
The vice versa of uttering and listening.
Communication is vital in the survival of the human race.
When there is a message or response, may it be in a physical or virtual way.
It is a continuous process that involves a sender giving out a message and a receiver sending feedback.
Communication is a connection that allows us people to gain and impart knowledge, feelings, and thought.
I define communication in 3 words: technology, conversation, and connection.
Communication is like music. You can just play one or play several. The last one's better since there's more effort.
Communication is simply the act of transferring information.
Communication is the imparting of ideas and sharing of information.
It's our medium of interaction and our circuit-like integration to every rational beings that we may encounter.
It is the way of all living things to work and understand each other.
Communication is the key to a better relationship among individuals.
The interaction between a person or a group which conveys certain ideas which are mutually understood by both parties.
Communication is a tool that helps connect the world.
Let's proceed now to the principles of communication. And the question is, what principle of communication do you usually employ in your daily conversations and why? Let's take a look.
Correct is the principle I use daily since having true information is very important.
Is the clarity of my voices so that the listener will understand what I'm supposed to say.
Principle of clarity. A clear message can give me a clear response, thus helping the both of us to understand better.
Concise, because I'm a straightforward person.
The ability to associate courtesy between communication lines in maintaining a balanced passive-active tones.
Courtesy, because I always talk in a polite and friendly manner.
I usually employ conciseness since I want to be quick and straight to the point.
The act of actively listening and giving feedback shows that the message is properly delivered and responded to.
Usually apply the principle of conciseness because not every one of us has the privilege of time to waste.
It should be clear in order to avoid miscommunication which leads to misunderstanding.
Conciseness, because I'd rather be scolded for 2 minutes than for 2 long hours.
I usually employ the principle of informality since I'm only exposed to my family.
I keep my topics well organized to make it easier for them to understand.
A clear communication is paramount since even enough information can be damaging if misinterpreted.
A polite speaking for a better conversation and a good impression.
Listening, giving all my attention to whom I am speaking.
Concrete. A message should contain the concrete principle in order for the receiver to fully understand the thoughts and avoid them.
I usually employ clarity with my conversation with others to avoid miscommunication.
If you're going to communicate, make use of Grice's maxims, and these are, number 1, the maxim of quality, which means that you have to be truthful as much as possible. followed by the maxim of quantity, which means that you have to be informative as much as possible, not too lengthy and not too short. Followed by the maxim of relation, which means that what you say or what you speak should be relevant to the topic at hand. Followed by the maxim of manner, which means that you have to be clear as much as possible. And that's Grice's maxim. And always remember, express, not to impress. Let's proceed now to the process of communication. And the question now is, in the process of communication, what is the most significant part and why?
Important part is where the receiver decodes the message because there are moments that the receiver misinterprets the message.
Information we intended to convey to the reason that without it, there will be no communication will happen.
Message. Without it, you can't initiate a conversation.
All components are needed for an effective communication because if one part fails, communication fails.
Message, as it awakens both parties' interests to exchange words.
All parts are important because it is impossible for communication to be effective if one part fails to function.
It would be the completeness of one's message, since it would initiate a conversation.
Decoding is dependent on the understanding of the receiver. They can then accept or reject the information sent.
I believe that all process of communication is equally important because it determines the outcome success.
Feedback, because it indicates if the receiver received the message well.
The message, since if I were like a reporter, I'd rather there were reviewers to forget all my lines.
The most significant part would be the message because it is the heart of communication.
The processing of the information that it is given, so that you two are in agreement.
Decoding is the most significant considering that the established subject matter must be precisely comprehended.
The process of greetings is the beginning of approach for communications.
Understand should understand the message to communicate effectively.
It would be the message because it is the heart of every communication and the fuel that ignites the exchange of thought.
Encoding would be the most significant part because it is where the ideas takes place.
This is now the communication process, which begins with a stimulus wherein it ignites for a communication to happen, followed by the ideation wherein it occurs in the mind of the communicator on how he or she would communicate, and then followed by encoding wherein it's the moment when he speaks or she writes or whatever manner that the communicator would send his or her message, and then followed by the transmission wherein it's the channel, whether it's written, spoken, or it could be through mobile phone or through laptop or whatever, and then followed by the reception wherein it's now the turn of the receiver or the listener. If it's spoken communication, then the receptor neurons of the listener would be activated. For example, you are now listening, and or if it's written, then you're using your eyes, and then followed by decoding wherein through the words that you hear or through the words that you're reading, they would form messages, and then followed by the understanding. So the words there would create a concept for you to understand the message, and then followed by a feedback or a form of response. Right, let's proceed now to the relevance of communication. And the question now is, what is the relevance of human communication? Let's take a look at the videos.
Communication is like water. Everyone needs it in order to connect.
Human communication builds relationship to others through sharing ideas and thoughts.
By communicating, we can create and develop a deeper sense of connection towards other people.
We communicate to develop relationship and to make our lives better.
It initiates a meaningful soul connection from both of the sender and the receiver of the message.
Communicating helps us to convey our personal thoughts, ideas, and message.
It helps every individual express and further understand each other as well as themselves.
Human interaction through communication allows good progress, all the while maintaining good relations.
Human communication helps build rapport, which is the world's foundation towards advancement.
Human communication is relevant because it's part of our daily life.
Human communication is what separates us from beasts. Without it, we'd just be animals using simple tools.
Human communication is the base of human interaction.
Communication is a very important life skill because it can lead to an even greater understanding.
It spans from personal to political affairs, which are equally important to build rapport among interlocutors.
It is the human sense. Without this, people cannot communicate.
It serves as a medium for influencing one's own thoughts and feelings.
Communication helps us express our thoughts and ideas. Thus, communication is a key in human development, unity, and survival.
The relevance of human communication is that it connects us and makes things happen.
Communication is very important because if we do not communicate, then we won't be able to create relationships and our identity. For example, our social identity as Filipinos or as members of a minority group. Let's proceed now to the models of communication. In your experience, what communication model do you frequently use and why? Let's take a look at the videos.
I choose interactional model since it's easy and commonly used by everyone.
Interactional model, since we're in the middle of health crisis, we often now communicate through social media.
Berlo's model, because it takes into account the emotional aspect of the message.
Linear when I'm talking to my pets, interactive when I use my phone and talk my ideas out.
Nonverbal because not only the lips will communicate but of eyes.
The Shannon-Weaver model because it is the format used in our daily conversations.
I seem to use Berlo's method since my senses also would affect how I would take the message.
Using the interactive communication model ensures that information is exchanged well from sender to receiver and vice versa.
I often use interactive model because I believe that effective engagements can lessen misunderstandings.
Interactional model, especially when I'm having chismis with my friends.
Schramm's model says daily conversations are cycled, and this model clearly shows the process.
I frequently use a transactional model because there needs to be an exchange of messages between the sender and receiver.
The linear communication model because it is very common and much more effective in imparting or receiving information.
Transactional model, in which it is the most open-minded, knowing that points of view vary for every communicator.
Berlo's model of communication because it emphasizes on the exchange of messages to make the conversation more effective.
The widely known and used Shannon-Weaver model of communication because of its simple yet practical.
I frequently use transactional model as it is the very effective one.
Alright, I'm going to show you the different models of communication. Let's begin with the linear model of communication. If it's so linear, it follows a straight path, okay? And then it begins with the sender sending the message, and then the message is received by the receiver. And take note, there's no response because it's linear. Then followed by Aristotle's model. It's just like your linear model, however, it's used in public communication. And take note, there is also an effect. Alright, up next, Lasswell's model. Lasswell's model is just like your linear model because it follows a straight path and there is no response. However, take note that there is an effect. Alright, next is Shannon and Weaver's mathematical model. In this particular model, it tries to look into what is the best transmitter. Have you noticed that there are spots in the Philippines or maybe in your area wherein there's a poor signal? Okay, so in that case, this mathematical model is very much applicable. Then followed by Newcomb's model. In this particular model, it tries to neutralize social relationship because as you can see, there's this A and B, and A and B are in conflict with each other. And so that A and B would be alright, we need a mediator in the form of X. So we need another person as the mediator. Another one is Osgood and Schramm model of communication. And this is now a cycle because here the speaker encodes the message, and then the listener decodes the message, interprets the message, and then the listener before now becomes the sender of the message. So the listener now encodes the message, and then the speaker before now becomes a listener. So decodes the message, and then interprets, and so on. And then followed by Westley and MacLean's model. This particular model is used in mass communication. For example, before the report of the reporter or a writer would reach the audience or the readers, there is an editor who would check the grammar and the veracity of facts and other technicalities of the report. Followed by Berlo's model of communication. In this particular model, it tells us that there are different factors for a communication to happen, and these are communication skills. It could be how you speak and how you listen, followed by your attitude towards the topic or towards the person you're talking to, followed by the knowledge. If you are knowledgeable about this certain topic, then you could say a lot about this particular topic. And if you are listening to a topic which you are not knowledgeable about, then you would just be in quandary because you won't be able to understand at all. And then followed by social system. The social system refers to our relationship towards other people. And then culture, that refers to our practices. And then the message. And by the way, there are 5 channels here. You have seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. So that's Berlo's model of communication. Followed by Barnlund's transactional model. And it tells us that speaking and listening happen at the same time. And then last but not the least, Dance's Helical model. It tells us that communication is a complex process. It begins with a single topic, and then you move to another topic, such that it forms a helix, just like the one on the screen. Alright, let's proceed now to nonverbal communication. And the question now is, what is the most unique nonverbal communication that you employ? Let's take a look at the videos.
My gestures and facial expression.
Eye contact. My eye speaks what lips cannot tell.
Paralanguage is unique as it only uses vocally produced sounds to highlight a word or an emotion.
In nonverbal communication, I always employ the facial expression.
Eye contact, hand gestures, and understanding the body language.
Gestures are very convenient to me because there are many universal gestures that are easy to pick up.
Gestures, hand signs, or body cues that are easy to understand and are most of the time understood.
Mano po is a unique nonverbal communication that we use here in the Philippines that implies respect to the elder.
By the way, there are different functions of nonverbal communication, and these are, number 1, complementing, which means that what you speak and what you act are the same. For example, you say, hello. So I'm saying hello at the same time, I wave my hand. Next is conflicting. For example, you would say, I'm okay. But take note, your paralanguage is different. You're saying you're okay, but you are not actually okay. Followed by substituting, wherein it's a replacement. So instead of saying hello, you would just maybe wave your hand or raise your eyebrows like this. And then followed by accenting, wherein if you want to emphasize a thing, for example, if you're going to deliver a speech, you try to maximize the volume if you want to emphasize a point or you want to emphasize this particular word. And then followed by regulating, wherein it tells us that there will be no interruptions because you know how to turn take. Let's proceed now to the different types of nonverbal communication. The first one here is Kinesics, which refers to your body movements. Another one here is Oculesics, wherein you use your eyes. For example, that's yes. Or maybe you have glowing eyes because you're very happy or you're very excited. So your eyes would actually speak. Because as they say, your eyes are the windows of your soul. Let's proceed now to proxemics. If you say proxemics, that refers to distance. So for example, if you are very much close with this person, so you are intimate, or you have this close relationship with this person. However, if you distance yourself, then more or less you're not close with that person. Another one is haptics. Haptics that refers to touch. And take note, there are different meanings of touches. For example, there is this friendly touch, a tap, or maybe a loving touch, a hug, or maybe you do high five. That's a form of haptics. Or maybe shake hands. That's also a form of haptics. Alright, let's proceed now to paralanguage. Your paralanguage refers to your change in intonation, pitch, and the rate of your voice. For example, if your mother is angry, you would know. Or if your mother is happy, you would also know. Or you would be able to understand the meaning by just listening to how they speak. Alright? Followed by the objectics. In the objectics, you would be able to know, for example, how the way they dress, whether this person is poor or rich. You can also say the profession of this particular person by just looking at the way how they dress. For example, engineer, so they're wearing the hard hat of a doctor, just like Dr. Mike, or maybe a professor or a banker or a bank teller or a nurse or anybody by just looking at their outfit. Followed by chronemics, that refers to time. For example, for us Filipinos, our concept of time is 1 hour late or beyond. Or if you're American, then you are on time. But if you are German, then more or less, you are 10 minutes earlier. Followed by olfactics, and that refers to smell. You would know what's the food being served by your mother by just judging the smell. You would also know the perfume of your friend by just, of course, smelling him or her. Or maybe a body odor, you would know. Let's proceed now to barriers of communication. The question now is, what is the worst communication barrier and why?
It is linguistics barrier. Based on my experience, talking to someone with a different language is very hard.
Languages and personal disabilities because it may lead into misunderstanding and conflict of communicating.
Interpersonal barrier. It is difficult to communicate with someone who lacks open-mindedness and totally shuts you up.
Language barrier because communication fails when two people are unable to speak the same language.
Emotions, as it influences a person's transparency way clearer and the feelings is read in between viewpoints words.
Perceptual barriers, because if you have different perspective and you're not open to each other, it's so hard to communicate.
The worst would probably be information overload, since I don't like taking in too much to remember.
Message barriers, such as the use of inappropriate language, defeats the purpose of sending out a message clearly, precisely, and effectively.
The hierarchical barrier is the worst obstacle, for it obstructs the free flow of information due to filtering.
For me, it's language barrier because it feels like you're talking to someone who doesn't exist.
The physical barriers is not much will matter when there's a choppy signal or where there's a soundproof wall in between.
Personally, it would be a language barrier since it can exclude others when you try to communicate your message.
Language, because it can be very hard to impart or share information to someone who doesn't understand you.
Coherence speaks volumes as consistency enlivens what you're attempting to convey.
It is the physical barrier because it can be good or bad.
Noise, because it distorts the message, leading to a misunderstanding.
For me, it would be the interpersonal barrier because a person who lacks the desire to participate would hardly absorb or understand the message.
Psychological barrier is the worst communication barrier as it holds clarity in a conversation.
And these are the different barriers to effective communication. Let's begin now with physical barrier. As you can see on the picture, there is this barrier which is a glass. And that glass there serves as a physical barrier. Another one is physiological barrier. For example, if you are sick, like you have a headache, stomach ache, or whatever ache you have. Another one is psychological barrier. For example, if you have a problem, then you won't be able to listen carefully to the lessons of your professors. Another one here is language barrier, and this is a very huge barrier. Why? Because if you're speaking different languages, then you won't be able to understand. So that's why you have to make use of a lingua franca or a common language which both communicators know how to speak and understand. Followed by cultural barrier. Among the Japanese, their greetings is through bowing, so with the Koreans. But for us, our greetings is through a form of maybe shake hands in the professional world. But among your friends, maybe you have a different form of greeting. For example, you have a different high five or maybe shake hands or whatever, stuff like that. Then followed by gender barrier. It's a barrier because women tend to talk about fashion, cosmetics, beauty products, clothes. For the men, they talk more of sports, recreation, adventures, vehicles, motor parts, or whatever. Next is interpersonal barrier. And this is a barrier because you tend not to communicate to people whom you are not close to or to strangers. Next is perceptual barrier. This barrier is very much relevant because we have different viewpoints. And in that case, we have to respect the viewpoints of others because that's a form of understanding. And then last but not the least is the ethics of communication. And the question now is, employing the ethics of communication, how should you communicate in the physical world? Let's take a look at the videos.
In communicating physically, we must consider feelings, ideas. The most important thing is respect.
Personally delivered with good communication skills and considerable habit is enough.
We should have the mouth to express, ear to listen, and mind that is open and easily to comprehend.
All ethics of communication are important in communicating in the physical world to avoid misunderstanding.
Respond effectively as much as you can to what is only given by the other party. Speak unbiased and without prejudice.
I should ensure that I have the ears to listen, not only a mouth to speak.
We should communicate in a concise and truthful way.
Striving to understand gives the importance of the values and ethics we can all employ with the use of communication.
In the physical world, one should be sensitive enough to empathize with the person you're talking to.
By listening well and answering the sender's message correctly.
One should be careful of one's words, especially in real life where people can punch you.
Communicating truthfully, speaking non-judgmentally, understand and consider the receiver's preferred communication channel.
First, you should make eye contact, or even have to employ some of a few hand gestures.
Honesty, where it allows you to speak confidently and earn the listener's trust.
I think before I speak, and at the same time, I listen.
Proper etiquette like focus, eye contact, and giving all my attention to whom I'm speaking.
Convey concrete and accurate message while casting timely gestures and never provoke or offend.
We should communicate in the physical world, allowing ourselves to interact with other people.
How about in the virtual world?
In communicating virtually, my answer in number 8 is same here. We just need to respect.
Even if we're in a virtual world, we should follow etiquette and our voices must be clear considering the possible internet interruptions.
There is so many buses virtually. We should be mindful and choose what to believe and when to react.
Speak non-judgmentally, speak from your own experience, and respect privacy and confidentiality.
Inculcate the ethical groundwork in communicating. Respect must always dwell in between ears and tongue.
I should use correct words and observe proper etiquette.
We still need to be concise and truthful since people are innately busy and we should respect that thought.
Virtually respecting other people prevents us from having future misunderstandings.
In the virtual world, implying emotions is hard, so one should choose the right words to avoid misunderstandings.
By checking the fact and not engaging on fake news.
One should keep confidential information secret, especially virtually where even a search history can go viral.
Communicate in a respectful manner. Be careful with humor and sarcasm since it might be perceived differently.
You must really try your best to make your topic simple and easier to understand.
Being tactful promotes safety, especially when virtual discourse can be mostly recorded.
Avoiding negative and sensitive words in communications.
Etiquette, interpret objectively what I decode before sending it.
Take turns in conveying messages, avoid things that would provoke or upset someone, and always convey messages that are true.
In the virtual world, we should avoid spreading false information.
Always remember, guys, that if we're going to communicate, we have to take note of their background, their culture, race, ethnicity, age, profession, so that we would be able to promote world peace at the same time understanding. And by the way, we should not impose our culture and our upbringing because we are not promoting the ethics of communication. If you got questions regarding this lesson or you got queries of any concern, drop an email at f.rene.bonifacio@cmu.edu.ph. I'll attend to your queries as fast as I can. If it's your first time to watch this video, kindly click the subscribe button for you to be updated with the latest videos of our course. And as always, God bless and stay healthy.